Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the opportunity. First, you're going to ask, why is PPC part of the Independent Power Producers Association? It's very simple. Like Exaro and some of the other big companies, we are a large energy user. We see both the risk and the opportunity presented by EXCO and IPPs, and we decided to start supporting the whole drive. We're going to talk about how to secure energy security in mines and in large users. And I think we're going to take a few cues from what Sean's discussion started off with. And also, firstly, I think we need to congratulate Goldfields. So please give them a round of applause. Nothing against you guys, but they really did something interesting there. So we're going to raise a few questions on how do we secure electricity, mainly electricity security, but also energy security for large industrial users. And I don't want to limit it to mines. I want to limit it to large industrial users, because most of the guys who are sitting in the panel with me also have large industrial applications, and not only mines. And there are going to be a few questions, but I want to frame it firstly to say, we all know that renewable electricity, renewable energy is getting there. It's getting to grid parity. The wind projects that have been delivered are cheaper than Medupi and Kusile. Yes, I know they're not baseload, I know that, but it's remarkable what's been achieved. We can put solar power in at less than R1 now. So it's starting to compete for large users with grid power. The second thing is storage. And the hot topic now is, of course, Elon Musk and his Tesla battery. But Mercedes-Benz is coming out with one. The guys at Caterpillar have got an interesting solution. And I think the next research point, the next part is storage. So I want to ask some questions around that, and then I'm going to see if we can challenge Ian Curry's notion about the importance of the grid. So generally, Gerhard, the first question I'm going to ask is, in terms of securing your power needs, without divulging some secret stuff, what's Anglo Platinum's strategy? What are you doing?
Egmont, firstly, I must say that we do depend on the grid. We have to have the grid. As Anglo Plats, we use in the region of about 700 megawatts of power, and that's a big chunk to be done with renewables. Having said that, you've also acknowledged that we do run a very diverse operation, in that mining is only about 40% of our operations. The rest consists of smelters and refineries and so on. And those are all 24/7 operations, and it needs power around the clock. Which brings about the very interesting question which you said around renewables. It's not baseload. So what do? Our current strategy is to try and address the peaks. We're very much into renewable power. We do subscribe to that. But having said that, at the moment, it's not a viable solution for baseload power. So the options that we have is to lop off the peaks and manage our system such that we have a much flatter profile, which is, I think, in line with what EXCO wants us to do as well, because that ultimately affords one good grid stability. If we have a really flat profile, that's great. Having said that, we're also very much into alternative energy sources, and it was raised earlier that fuel cells is for us very much on the horizon. And we currently thinking very hard how to bring fuel cells into the mix, and we see it as renewable, provided that one can have the fuel being renewable. But it's a very clean source of energy, so that is also currently forming part of our strategy, although not fully formulated yet.
Can I ask where you are with the whole fuel cell thing? Because you've presented at some conferences and you showed us what you can do, but where are you? I mean, is it becoming close to where it's feasible?
Well, fuel cells are certainly feasible in the kilowatt range, but certainly not in the megawatt range at the moment. Having said that, we've got locos running in our mines at the moment on fuel cells. We've done a rural electrification project near Kroonstad. Recently, we've done one in the Eastern Cape. ran COP17 on fuel cells a few years ago. There's a fuel cell running at Lephalale, producing 200 kilowatts of baseload power for a project there. So it is on the horizon, but it's not in terms of megawatts yet. But that's what we're working towards. We think that's the next level of development, along with batteries or storage. Maybe we shouldn't limit it to batteries. Maybe we should say storage, as you said, and that's going to be a topic of a discussion tomorrow morning.
Last question in terms of this, because it also touches on what we're going to talk just now. You said the renewable options are not feasible yet. Is it in terms of the project or is it in terms of the financing?
Are you talking about fuel cells?
No, I'm talking about renewables in general or then alternatives in general.
At this stage, one has to be honest about it. It doesn't pay yet. Although you say it's close to grid parity, it's really not there yet. It's got a few years to go, and I gave a talk last year at the same conference and said, we'll probably be there. What did I say, Adrian? Probably 3 years from now or so. And I still maintain that. I think we are closer than what we've been. But, and I believe the landscape is going to change significantly around our mines. Remember what I also said last year, we don't have huge real estate, so that is a problem for us. But it's how do we actually tackle this problem, make place for these renewables. And in our case, I must also say, we see renewables as PV. We don't have sufficient wind where we have mines. We also don't have biomass. So in our case, renewables equals photovoltaics.
Thanks. Christo, you've got lots and lots of property.
Yes.
Tell me about what you're doing.
Yes, we do have lots of property. One big project that is happening on our property at the moment, it's not our project anymore, although we did kick it off and we did do a lot of the work on it. It's now developed by another company, and that is a concentrated solar power that has been awarded preferential bid in the last refit process. They called it 3.5, probably because the half was the additional CSP that they added later. But we will just be the landowner. So yes, it's taking place on our land. They will lease the land from us, but full development and everything is done by them, and the power will be sold into the grid. So there won't even be an IPP from our side. So without going into too much detail, that also shows to you the appetite from the company towards these things. And that is, although it is supported, there's that strong view, and I think it's in most of the mining companies that don't operate in places like Africa where there's no stable grid. And that is, when we have money to invest, we want to invest it in mining projects and not in energy projects. Although we want to, through some way, support energy projects and through that also make energy security a bit better. But the appetite is simply not there yet to actually go and do the power generation ourselves.
I'm going to ask you two things. Firstly, does the CSP project give you enhanced grid security in terms of the local grid? Second question, what will change your mind in terms of making energy a part of your core strategy? Or do you think in general mining companies will always focus on mining and let the renewable energy part done by other people?
I think it's got, I'm sort of going to answer your last question first. I think it has to do with where you're mining. If we have the conversation here with the mines, I mean, we only mine in South Africa, Kumba Iron Ore, the company I work for. This will be a total different conversation from developing a mine in Mauritania or Ghana or one of those remote places. Simply because of the whole ESCOM factor and a stable grid. Okay, I know it's not that stable anymore, but to some extent we've still been able to manage it. And I think unless that risk becomes so great that we really can't manage anymore, I think that appetite won't be there to do own generation. In terms of my view on CSP, the big advantage of CSP, but obviously it comes with a cost, is the fact that it's got a storage solution. So our biggest problem at this stage, especially with load shedding and load curtailment, is the fact that, especially now in winter, when ESCOM is getting their act on the maintenance together a little bit more, all the load shedding is happening between 5 and 10 in the evenings. And unfortunately, that's when the sun don't shine. And I don't know how the wind plants perform during that time, because generally, you know, when I'm down at the coast, the wind blows during the day, and then between 5 and 7 it dies down a bit, and then as the temperature changes between land and sea, the wind starts blowing again after that. So that's just my personal opinion. This is not the opinion of any scientific, this is just my personal experience. And therefore my thought is that even wind will be down a bit during the time when we actually need the power. And with a CSP solution with 4 to 7 hours storage, depending on the amount of capital you have to spend, that power can be dispatched exactly during that peak time when we actually need it. So, and this is again a personal view, is that I think the whole refit process was a bit short-sighted in the fact that it gave so much allocation towards wind and PV and so little towards CSP. And so I'm a big advocate of CSP, but I mean, I don't have any interest in any CSP anyway, so I'm not a salesman trying to sell CSP. That's just my viewpoint. But I also do believe that no energy solution is a one-package solution. Whether it's in South Africa, whether it's in any other country, whether it's for a mine or whatever, there's a package that will provide you with a stable solution. And that package will consist of maybe coal, maybe nuclear, maybe gas, diesel, and then renewable, which is for Gerhard PV, but it is for the other people around the stable, PV, CSP, wind, and what about wave? Nobody here has talked about anything about wave power. Maybe it's because there's not a lot of mines close to the coast, but there's certainly some industries close to the coast. So that is another thing we may have to investigate is wave power.
Nick, you're in a completely different situation than the guys next to you. You operate
absolutely.
You operate in a very different environment. So compared to what they said, I think I'm gonna ask you to paint a picture, and then I'm gonna share a little bit about our experience as well before we move on to the next point.
We operate 3 mines in Tanzania. We don't have stable grid power. So renewables is a part solution. It's not the solution. We've looked at several things. We've looked at power from several other sources. And more critically is the quality of the power coming into the mines. I don't believe the mines in South Africa are there yet where you get large dips and swells which damage your equipment, and you start hardening up on your equipment and putting in solutions for that. We've done a tremendous amount of work with this. We've been having problems since we connected our 2 major mines in 2009. So grid stability, we want to stay on grid as much as we can, although we're paying a lot more than South Africa. We're paying 12 US cent a kilowatt hour. You can start getting PV solutions in close to that and on parity, but it's a part solution. So that's going to hedge some of our long-term power costs, but we're still looking at other things to stabilize the power to the mine sites, which is critical. And I see the South African mines moving into that in the near future.
How do you determine the mix of renewable energy and I assume diesel or HFO? Have you developed a strategy around that? How do you determine that mix?
Yes, currently we haven't got PV running yet. It's still conceptual project phase. Effectively on the grid power, when we had very bad stability problems with grid and grid outages from the TANESCO supply, all our mines we've moved to full diesel backup, but it's as backup. On some of the mines we would run spinning power to keep critical parts going, and then allow ramp up when the grid power falls away. And it's also certain times of the year. So in the very wet season, it's a lot worse. So you put on spinning power during those periods. So we've learned to cope with it. We've also learned to, as I said, harden all our equipment so that you don't have problems with blowing cards and so on your drives, etc.
Maybe to share what we've done, we've had some interesting experiences in the last 2-3 years with our projects in Rwanda and in the DRC, where in Rwanda we will use 15% of the country's power. So the country produces 100 megawatts and we're going to use 15. So it's a very interesting challenge. They don't have enough generating capacity, so we're going to run the cement plant on diesel initially, and we're working very hard to find alternatives. But in the west of Rwanda, the sun doesn't shine and there's no wind and there's no water. So you're kind of stuck. But what I find is a common theme in terms of securing energy security in mines is the fact that each mine or each property has its own characteristics and its own potential solution. And that's why I found the Carbon War Room Rocky Mountain Institute methodology that Goldfield used very interesting. Because what I find as a company energy manager, and Gerhard, you can probably echo me, is sometimes my door is run through by people who want to sell me solutions. They want to sell me solar PV, or they want to sell me this, or nobody's looking at the real issue. Or nobody's trying to help me solve my problem. But I'm gonna start talking about the attitudes of utilities in especially Gerhard, where you operate and where we operate in terms of helping increase your energy security. Because what we found and we operate in Zimbabwe, the DRC, and in Rwanda actively. And we found more than welcome. We found active support for our own energy projects in those countries. And when we said we have a few balance sheet issues we would like to perhaps sell on or wheel, the question was always, yes, please, when? And I find a completely different attitude here, which we all know. And unfortunately, that's the one area where South Africa is behind, is its attitude towards private power production. Let's forget the renewable energy procurement program, which is fantastic. But just the attitude towards companies who want to generate their own power and push back into the grid and maybe have private customers. I find in almost every country that we've worked with a much more supportive environment from a personal point of view as well as from a regulatory point of view than in South Africa. And somehow we're not getting it right. I don't know, Nick, your experience in Tanzania?
Very difficult. The TANESCO have got a tremendous amount of projects on the go, both in generation, transmission and distribution. All of these are running way behind. Most of the power generation is in the south, and then they wheeled it up a 660 kilometer line to the northern areas where the mines are. That's at its thermal limit now. It's at 220 kVA. They're upgrading that to 400. The project should have been finished in 2014. I think 2017 is hopeful. So it's these kind of issues you've got, and the actual running of the utilities. So that we find fairly much through Africa. I agree with you, they're always willing to talk, but it depends on how much they can actually do and how long it takes to get things done. That's extremely frustrating.
Gerhard?
Egmont, if I can just also comment on it. You know, it's very easy for us to sit here and do some ESCOM bashing. Because we like to do that. You know, it's kind of, they've stuffed up badly. But if you look at it on the contrary, ESCOM has actually done a marvelous job in managing the current situation with regards to the outages that they do have, the curtailment, as well as the load shedding. At any one time, there's more than 90% of the system running. It's that 10% that's biting us, that they're not able to supply with us. And I think one of the fundamental reasons is that we've had too much regulation. And I would actually like to throw in the appeal for the deregulation to happen and splitting up transmission, distribution, and generation as per the REDS model that they have started, and allow more IPPs to come in and plug into the grid as an independent power producer without very long, arduous PPAs or having to sell to ESCOM itself. I think that'll just ease the situation a lot. But having said that, I think one need to and Mike has shown us all the graphs. One should give credit where credit is due with the limited constraints that EXCOM have had with regards to not allowing to be built power stations, building them and so on. They've done quite well. It's just for now, in terms of security, we can't run our business if we have continued 10% curtailment. And that's where the problem currently is.
I'm going to ask you before I ask Christo. Are you able to say what curtailment's costing you?
Well, yes, I can, but now I'm not able to divulge that. Having said that, it's easy for us at the moment, where we run furnace operations, and in a furnace inherently you have capacity. So yes, while we're hurting in terms of furnaces that are being damaged because of thermal stresses, and we're probably going to have to rebuild them quicker. At this stage, the 10% we're not seeing it on the bottom line yet. But if it continues this way, for 12 months, then we most certainly will. But at this stage, what we've seen is the severe inconvenience. Every time I get a phone call from EXCOM, I get severely irate about it. But I mean, that's just what happens.
Christo, you run a similar operation to PPC, but just much bigger. How's curtailment affecting you?
Yes, I'm in a very similar situation than Gerhard. I won't be able to divulge any figures, but what I can say is we've been able to manage so far, especially when the curtailment is only for a period of, typically what happens during peaks, say 5 to 8 or 5 to 10. We've been able to switch off loads that we can get away without influencing production too much. Those are things like bore pumps and those sort of things. So yes, generally, like when it comes to dewatering, you have to dewater at a certain rate to keep your mine levels low. Otherwise, the water levels low enough and not to endanger your mining. So you can switch it off for a period of time and allow the levels to rise if you have additional pumping capacity to then dewater a bit quicker, which in a lot of areas we can do during the evening then when power is available. So that is typically one of the things that we do. It is not the best solution, but at least we get away without influencing too much of our production. When it's longer periods than that, then we have to start switching off certain production modules in the plant. Again, depending on how much we need to curtail, we do have a bit of catch-up capacity. But when the curtailment happens, like specifically in May and earlier in April, where it's extended periods of time, a couple of days in a row, then yes, it bites us.
Interesting from our point of view, curtailment hasn't affected our ability to produce. What it has done is it's increased our electricity cost. Because we used to be extremely aggressive in terms of time of use management. And our peak time usage was around about 8, 9%, 10%. And that's increased significantly because, funnily enough, a lot of the load shedding happens over weekends. It's off-peak, cheapest power. Now we have to run when power is most expensive. And we've been gearing our entire production to run when the power is at the cheapest. And that's probably the biggest source of frustration that we have. But I'm going to latch onto that point. I'm going to start with you, Nick, in terms of your attitude towards energy efficiency and the behavior and the awareness of energy efficiency in your organization because of poor power quality. I mean, obviously it has made a difference, but I want to find out what happened and how much of a difference has it made.
Yeah, we've done a tremendous amount of work on ensuring that we run as efficiently as we can. Power factor correction, protection of our gear. I've spoken through all of that. Got quite smart on how we switch over when there's problems with grid stability to diesel systems and ramping those up and down depending on how the grid switches in and out. And then also working very closely with the energy provider to help them with solutions on where there are problems. Assisting with spares for the SVCs and so on at the main substations through the country. So yeah, it's a tremendous amount. It's a lot of work everywhere. But you've got to continually ensure that you using the power as efficiently as you can. In our case, extremely expensive, a lot more than EXCO, and certainly with the sort of spinning power we do on diesel and so on, that hurts.
Christo, you guys have done a lot, but how's the curtailment issue, the whole the load shedding issue we've had in the last 6 months? How's it changed the attitude on the plant?
To be honest with you, it actually made the guys a bit negative. And the big reason for that is most of the South Africans here will remember many moons ago there was something called ECS, Energy Conservation Scheme. And we were all gearing ourselves for that in the whole EXCO process. And just some background, and that is that there was a baseline, and then you have to save 10% on that baseline. And if you did energy efficiency projects, you got credit for that. So we were going full steam ahead with energy efficiency projects in the hope that when there's another crisis, like what happened now, ECS will be proclaimed, and we will actually be okay because we would have done what was required. Now we sit in the situation, we've done all our, well, not all our energy efficiency projects, but we've done a lot of energy efficiency projects. We've saved probably around, if I can remember, 12% in terms of our electricity use since 2008-9. And yet when there's an emergency and we have to curtail, we have to cut back our 10 or our 20%, regardless of the fact that we've implemented a lot of energy efficiency projects. So there's a bit of a negative attitude towards that, but there's nothing we can do about it. We just have to go. The one thing that we did in terms of energy efficiency, see in the last couple of years, you know, in the beginning, when you start with energy efficiency, you pick the low-hanging fruit, you do the easy things that everybody does. You switch to different lighting, you buy energy efficient motors and those sort of things. And our biggest savings were not in the technology changes. Our biggest savings came through process optimization. When there's 2 or 3 conveyors and they're running at half or quarter of the load, you know, switch one off and run 2 of them at full load. Those sort of things. This is a simple example. You know, if you have three crushers in a stream and they're all running at half feed, switch one off and run 2 of them at choke feed. So those were the sort of things we did, and those realized in what I like to call proper energy efficiency savings, not just this little 0.1% or 0.2% there, but real savings. The only disadvantage of those sort of savings is it does tend a bit to focus on behavior of people as well, because yes, a lot of it was automated through the PLC systems, but some of it also had to depend on operators to do certain things to realize those savings. But once people started to see those savings and it came into their KPIs, you know, it changed their attitudes towards energy. And also the plant guys who used to be opposed to energy because they think you want to save energy so I can't produce. Now they realize they're producing and it's actually costing them less for the same production, so they're starting to become positive. So there's those 2 aspects. You know, on the one side, realizing the savings, people become positive, and then the side we're in now, where we've done all of this work, we're not getting any credit for it. We still have to cut back when it's times are tight.
Gerhard, you've walked this road a long time. So tell us what this has done for you guys.
Yeah, we started off when the original National Energy Efficiency Accord was done in 2005, and we subscribed to a 15% figure back then, and we've achieved that. It was a 10-year target. It was revalidated in 2010 to be, you know, the remaining bit was 7%, and we're actually overachieving on that as well. And a lot of it does consist of the low-hanging fruit, changing to lights and stuff like those, but it's also more fundamental. When an earlier speaker had said that we've cut our maximum demand from close to 1,000 to about 700. Now that's just, you know, through proper maximum demand control. So yes, we've done our bit, and when we get the phone call from EXCO, it hurts. Because it's now not switching off lights anymore. It's now switching off furnaces. So yeah, it does hurt, but you know, there's nothing else we can do. We have installed significant amounts of diesel generators as well, following the 2008 blackouts which we had. And we're actually able to run 10% on our diesel generators. But I don't want to tell you what the cost of that is. It's just huge. So we rather curtail than switch on the generators at this stage. But it is an option for us.
We found something interesting in that our operations have started realizing that we have only so much electricity, and that we have to make as much as possible when we have power. It's not that we have we get switched off completely. We're also on curtailment. But in Zimbabwe, for example, where the entire country uses 2,000 megawatts and it only produces 1,000 megawatts, you have 5-6 hours of load shedding every single night. We're on a ring fence tariff, which means we get power continuously, but every time the power gets switched off, you have inrush currents. Every time the power gets switched off, you have an issue. So power quality is a huge problem. And those guys have started realizing that they've got to make do with what they have, and they've got to make as much product as possible with the kilowatt hours that they have. And just that single mindset change has catalyzed an enormous change in how they behave, how they start looking at things. Suddenly people stop when they have here a compressed air leak. I see guys automatically changing procurement procedures to do lights. I see them coming to me before they buy new compressors. Previously, they said, oh, we bought a new compressor. I said, shouldn't you have looked at your lines first? And they said, yeah, maybe. Now it's the other way around. So people start really thinking about it. And I think that's perhaps one positive thing. But Gerhard, I'm going to ask you two last questions. Firstly, what's going to make you make your own power? Okay? That's the first question. And I'm going to ask you to give a general answer on that. The second thing is, Tina Jumat Peterson tells us our power is cheap to the mines and we should pay more. Yet I'm also, like you, a member of the EIUG, and we're telling the world that our power is too expensive and we're subsidizing the rest of South Africa. I want to hear what, I'm going to tell people later what I think, but I'm going to ask what you think first.
Okay, we've seen in the graphs, one of the graphs that was put up, that we're not the cheapest, and EXCO used to tell that to us for many years. But we're actually almost, I think, the third most expensive in the world in the specific graph that was put up. So to say that we're cheap is a fallacy. And energy is a significant input to us. In our case, since 2008, from 2008 to now, it's doubled. In our as a percentage of our total cost of utilities, of OPEX. It went up from 6% to 12%, which is a significant increase, if you think that during the same period, in our case, labor has stayed pretty constant. So electricity is now very expensive, and at what price, or what will make it happen for us, it's when we can't produce anymore. At some stage, we're being forced at the moment, and I can tell you there's lots of guys sitting in meetings discussing contingency plans as to when do we build what. And we're going to do something, but I can't tell you what because I don't know yet. I don't know what the mix is. We need a significant amount of energy to actually stabilize our production, but we're busy working on it. I'll tell you about it next year when I know more myself.
Christo?
Yeah, my answer is very similar, but also different. Our main energy source is not electricity. Our makeup is about 70% diesel, 30% electricity. And now before everybody gets all excited to say we can replace your diesel with PV, is to run haul trucks. It's not to generate electricity. So that's our main, and as you all know, I mean, diesel is more expensive. So when we look at cost, that ratio is even more different. So we don't know. The appetite, I mean, we've tried to do it from Kumba's side. We've tried to do it in the Anglo stall from the coal side, Gerhard and them at the Plats. But at this stage, the appetite is not there. It's not supported by management. And at some point, the business case will swing towards now we have to generate our own electricity. But when that is, we don't know. The price path, I think it was Sean who mentioned that EXCO is obliged to give us a price path. Was it Mike? I don't know. But somebody said it. At this stage, we develop our own price path in Anglo-American every year, against which we evaluate our projects. And at this stage, the numbers are still not in our favor to invest in our own generation. So maybe the day that swings, you know, whether it will be through a clever forecast that someone has generated, or whether we actually hit that point where we now pay so much for EXCO power that we can say to them, look here, that this is the actual cost. It's not what we're guessing we're going to pay in a year or 2 or 10 years' time. I think when that point comes, that's probably when it's going to swing.
I'm going to ask you a different question, Nick, because your power is very expensive already. So the imperatives are there for you. What's going to make you install captive power?
Well, I think we've already got full backup, and we can run all our mine sites independently of diesel gens. That's sitting at about 25 US cent per kilowatt hour, which is double the grid power. So the incentive is always there to go back to grid and to stabilize it and improve it. And then, as I said, we are looking at PV to come in at under the grid power parity, but it's just hedging your future power cost at this stage. I'm sure South Africa is going to get there quite soon on the pricing. I know you guys are all ducking and diving, but the maintenance backlog on all the gear, and I was in mining here for 26 years, so I'm quite aware of it. The maintenance backlog in all the power stations, etc., the price has to go north. It's a question of how much and how fast.
Okay, we have a similar point. I think in the cement industry we have a slightly different situation in terms of worldwide power cost than you have, Gerhard. And I almost want to compare it to buying Coke. Not cocaine, Coca-Cola. If you go and you buy a shipload of Coca-Cola, you will pay something. If you go and buy a can of Coke at the spa, you're going to pay, I don't know, 3 times the price. And I want to tear my hair out when somebody phones John Robbie in the morning and bitches about their power cost. Because if they pay R1 a kilowatt hour, it's cheap. It's really cheap in terms of household power cost. If a guy like Anglo Platinum pays 65, 70 cents a kilowatt hour, it's really expensive. Because his competition's paying 30 cents a kilowatt hour in the US or in Kazakhstan. For us, our total usage is 135 megawatts across the country, and that's across 11 sites. So we're not in the same league as you guys are, Gerhard. And electricity for cement in South Africa is not as expensive as it is, for example, in Asia or in Europe. But it's starting to bite. And what we will see within the next 10 years a significant shift in our operations in terms of captive power. PV, waste heat recovery, and maybe even some biomass. Simply because the price points will reach the point where we can integrate this into our operations. And for us, it's a simple question of cost. I believe the grid we've got the best grid in Africa. I agree with Ian Curry's notion. It's something we need to protect at all costs because it's a massive national asset. And we need to open it up so that we can push power into the grid from smaller generators and maybe some users as well to get that flexibility going. Because then you'll strengthen the grid and you'll need less transmission lines and it'll be more distributed. I think something that is very, very sad is that Brian Damas left ESCOM when he did because he was a strong advocate of distributed generation. And I personally believe ESCOM's current business model is outdated, and if they continue it, it will fail. So they must split up into generation and into distribution and open up the grid so that we can do what we do best, to operate in a free market. Gentlemen, a last word from you, and then we'll close. Let's start with Nick.
Yes, I think on renewables, it's a part solution. There is certainly a place for it to play, and in South Africa it's going to get bigger as we move into the future, is what I see.
I want to refer to the presentation we had from the Carbon War Room in terms of evaluating projects to those little blocks, that flow diagram. Evaluating a project, when you're selling a product, it's easy to take one of those little blocks and come and hammer on that thing to try and sell something to somebody. But there's a bigger picture, and I think we should all, when we look at our energy efficiency, at our energy consumption, at our needs going into the future, we have to look at the bigger picture. When we evaluate projects, we have to look at the bigger picture, consider everything, and I think that is the right approach. And within that approach, at some stage, we may or may not get to a point where we will also have to start in own generation, and specifically then in renewables.
Last word from you, Gerhard.
Egmont, it's amazing how the speed at which the industry is changing. If you think about, we discussed the same topic last year, and this year there are many, many more that have already done PVs, renewables. If one just also look at the price of the bidding process to EXCO, how much the price have come down from, let's call it rebid 1 through to 3. I mean, the prices are fairly well known. And it's tremendous how the price have come down. So I think, I'm quite upbeat about renewables in 5 years' time. The landscape will definitely have changed. It's a question of how much for us as well. And we need to really put our money where our mouths are.
So you need to just put your money where your mouth is.
I think we're going to put up many more than what we think. It's a matter of addressing. If anybody can arrange for the sun to shine 24 hours a day, that'll be tremendous.
And then the last message, I think, to some equipment providers is, Christo's, don't sell me products, help me solve my problem. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening to us. I hope it was valuable. Gerhard, Christo, and Nick, thank you very much. I think what you told us was extremely valuable. Thank you. Please give them a round of applause.